Alright, so as a result of Blue Healer's issues with his Enjomor and some of the other videos, I am going to pop this apart and do a walkthrough of all the issues that I sorted out with mine again. So to remove the flywheel, we just loosen these 4 bolts, and then I have to give a little pry between this gap to get that collar to pop out. Those are fully loosened. You don't have to take these all the way out for this collar to come apart. You just have to leave space so you can get there. A little pry, you heard it pop, now it's loose. And then when we put that back on, we'll just clamp those down and it'll wedge in and close the slit on here. But now we can see, yeah, in here, let's there. Okay, so let's start on this side. The timing for this, that makes that lighting a bit better. Okay. So the timing is based on this bumper here, and when it hits the reed switch. So this bumper hits the reed switch, and that's how you get your timing. So as the engine turns, it's got ignition, the power stroke, and then, oh, that's exhaust. Okay, so I forgot which way it turned for a second. So compression, it hits ignition on top dead center here, and then it has exhaust, and then the second step is the push rod pushing the exhaust valve open here. So I did a couple things. First, I put this washer on the pawl here. That gives a sharper edge and also gives a little bit of a positive latch on here, so that when I hold the push rod out and put the latch in there, the latch stays stuck on the push rod. If you've got the latch with a negative rake like that, then when the push rod pushes on it, it'll force the latch out. And you want the latch to hold until the push rod gets lifted by the cam, and then have it release. So that's the first important thing to make these hit and miss actions work. Any hit and miss, you want to make sure that your detent latch here, whatever shape it's in, is going to hold the push rod. Oh, I gotta rotate that till it's closed. This is going to hold your push rod out on its own without getting pushed back by this spring. And then The second big thing I did, which I talked to Blue Healer about, and some of the other channels have other options or ideas, is I put washers behind these weights. That way there's a gap here and it keeps the oil that you put on this mechanism from forming a film and gluing or sticking the weights in place to prevent them from flying outward. Because you'll remember this governor is on our camshaft, and the camshaft rotates at half the speed of the engine, so the slower it goes, these are going half that speed, and so they have less angular momentum flinging them outward. Another thing, Blue Healer had to do the same thing. I did with mine. Other people have mentioned it. The third wire needs to be removed here. I had mine up here shorting out on this metal bracket because the ignition voltage goes to the big red wire, but also sometimes goes through the third wire in this harness. Oh, and I need the thing. Alright. Now, let's turn that around. Okay, so from this side, we can see the cam on the back side of the cam gear, and I'm going to hold the exhaust valve in. And if you watch, it rotates for ignition, and it's got one bump that lifted the rod, and then the engine fires and it's got this bigger bump that comes around and finishes opening the exhaust. Here, top dead center, the exhaust closes and it rolls down to the intake stroke here, and then the compression stroke is where that first bump is coming up for the ignition again. So I time these engines by rotating them slightly backwards, because when you're rotating it backwards, you can see I'm at top dead center, and as we turn it backwards, top dead center, there we go. We're at top dead center. The exhaust valve has just closed. The push rod is in place. We're turning it backwards, and that's when you get the exhaust action of the cam lobe. And so when you're turning it backwards, you can watch it push the exhaust valve in more easily to get the timing right, and obviously shift the gear teeth as you need to. But like I said, by turning it backwards, then you get to watch the exhaust stroke from this side. And then here's an intake, and you'll see it's the exhaust push rod keeps going down a little bit during the intake, and it lifts off the reed. Yep. Okay, still in the shot. It's hard to make sure that I'm still in the shot when it's so close. So, yeah. See, the beginning of the intake stroke, it's still moving the push rod back. That's why I tend to time the cam on these by rotating them backwards slowly. But that is the trick I have for timing this cam up. And like I said, the major modifications I did are these little washers and making sure that this latch holds well when the push rod is hooked on it. So otherwise, a good valve job is always important on all these little engines, and I hope that anybody else who has one of these has been watching me and Blue Heeler and all the other guys with them and has been able to get some ideas to get them going and make them run well.